Music, dance, theater. It's time to take a seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez. Hear from performers, producers, presenters, and creators who enrich our lives in the performing arts. Who's on stage? Here is Tom Alvarez to introduce you.
Hello, and welcome to On the Aisle with yours truly, Tom Alvarez. My guest on today's episode is Tom Cochrun, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, author, blogger, and community volunteer. Join me now as I go on the aisle for a conversation with Tom, who is now retired and lives in Cambria, California.
Central Indiana. Wish TV is now live on YouTube TV and Hulu Live, offering more hours of local programming than any other station. Search for Wish TV or look for CW8 on both YouTube TV and Hulu Live to find us. Watch local news, sports, and lifestyle shows live from Wish TV. You can still catch Wish TV free over the air or stream it live on wishtv.com and on the free Wish TV mobile apps. Wish TV, available in more places for the latest news, weather, and sports.
Well, you know, my friend, you haven't lost your love of research, and you are a conveyor. You are still a storyteller, and ever since I've known you, you are a collector of interesting facts. You're a compendium, actually.
Some of them might even be of value. I don't know.
No, I'm a history nut, and that's why I produce documentaries as well, for as long as I did. Certainly not in your caliber that you did, but we did okay. I think we both in our own way, and we did for those listeners. You can find it on YouTube. Tom, I think it's got over. Last time I looked, I think it's over 500,000 views of our James Dean documentary, which you hired me to produce for you, your company, 19th Star. And that lives on, and it's still being discovered because there are a lot of comments from young people who are just discovering James Dean,
And I think
I love telling the story about how when you lived down south, in near Paragon, and how we used to daydream about someday producing a document, how much we loved James Dean, and then we manifested it, we made it happen. What a cool story, right?
Yeah, it is, and it is a great work, and it stands up today. And I think that was because the idea that we hit on was, as I look at it now, and I'm not just patting each other on the back here, but it was a brilliant choice to not use narration, but to allow the people who were intimate with James Dean to tell the story, and to put it together in that context, and sort of it was a reveal of this person through the other, and then the title James Dean and Me. I think I think we were smarter than we knew we were at the time.
Fearless. We're fearless. And, I've always been that way, and so have you. I don't ever think about the downside. I just do it. And I think what we have in common is that we've both always trusted our instincts, right?
Absolutely.
And it's so important to be able to just have that. And for me, I look back on that as insecure as I was, but at the same time, it was a dichotomy, and yet I was so fearless. Go figure, But I
Well,
don't think I'm alone as an artist. Artists, we carry these insecurities, and yet we're just like, don't tell me no, I'm going to do it. Somehow I'll make it happen.
and as I said, we were either angry or eager, enthusiastic young men, and we had an idea and a vision and of what we wanted to do with our lives. And
Yeah.
for your path, you've pioneered in many ways, just simply by your birthright, and that is a lens in your life that I appreciate it, and I try to understand it, but I can never be in that skin and know how much that was. But I can tell you, you cannot have the admiration for yourself that I do, because I watched from a distance of your being a pioneer in many ways. and then you sort of subsumed all of that and just became a factor and a force in the community, and an impresario, an entrepreneur, a communicator. You've created things, you've created a legacy. But when you started in the journey in step one and step two and those first steps, it was not easy. And but you had you had the conviction and I think the confidence in yourself, even if you were, somewhat insecure as creative souls are. I think you had something in you, a light that kept you going. And
Well,
and I think that's really,
I've been very candid about my recovery on this podcast, Tom, and about open about my sexuality. I've been really open, and I learned a long time ago, if you put it out there, no one can use it against you, right? I learned that the hard way. Coming up through broadcasting, there was I faced a lot of prejudice, not only because of being a Latino, but also being gay and having to when you met me, I was deeply in the closet, and yet, I gravitated towards you because you accepted me, and you were a fellow colleague in the business. When I came to Channel 6, I thought everybody would be, for the most part, the newsroom. They were very, I would say, they leaned left. All those great journalists I worked with, Howard Caldwell and the people in the newsroom, the news director, Bob Gamble, all those reporters were top notch. Many of them came from print journalism. They
yeah.
were solid. You remember that group of people, right?
That was the gold standard in Indianapolis. I mean,
Hmm.
back in those days, they were absolutely the gold standard, and the people were top quality.
And
Uh,
you were surrounded by that in radio as well. I mean, were you not? Fred Heckman is one example, but others, right? Your colleagues?
Yeah, well, Lou Palmer was, a classic. Was absolutely one of the greatest radio newscasters ever. He just had a style that was unique. There was a fellow in Chicago that some people may have heard, Howie Roberts, and he and Palmer were oftentimes considered the two best radio newscasters in America at the time. Fred Heckman was obviously a standard in the community. He was relied upon. He was sort of the Walter Cronkite of
Oh, yeah.
Indianapolis time, well trusted. But we were also supported by other people. The great Sid Collins, a remarkable man, an interesting personality, tragic, end, but just a wonderful and decent human being, a real humanitarian. Guys like Jim Shelton, who had been a B-52 pilot during World War II, but was a very popular announcer and salesman, Jack Morrow. So yes, yeah, I was fortunate to be able to go to work in a place that there were giants all around.
I think what you and I shared in common is too that we soaked up everything we possibly could, you know.
Yes, yes, yeah, I think so.
We were very, very intent that I, recently, Tom, I have to tell you this. My business partner for the production company that we run, Magic Thread Cabaret, Dustin Klein and I have been together now for 10 years. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary. And he will come to me often, and not often, but he gives me feedback. I think that when you're in the public eye, and I am somewhat against my will sometimes, but you make a choice to broadcast, then people are going to judge you based on their projections or whatever. And so, but he came back and said, Tom, some people think you're just too intense. I said, well, what does that mean? And my insecurities all came to a fore, right?
Yeah,
And I asked around. I actually did. I actually put posted on Facebook, and I never do that. I never overshare and all that. But I had to know, what do they mean by that? I think I knew, but I wasn't sure. Well, what I discovered is what they're talking about is like when I get focused. I'm very serious, and I've never been one for small talk. I think you know that.
yes.
And it just makes some people uncomfortable. when you're serious. But I also want to have balance. I'm not serious all the time, you know. I don't even know why I brought that up, but that from my youth, I've always been that way, though. I wouldn't have gotten anywhere if I wasn't focused, laser focused on the work.
Well, you had an idea that I think you were pursuing. I was fortunate also to have, I think, as a kid, an idea of what I wanted to do. Uh, I told this story to somebody once. I was a kid in Muncie, Indiana. Mom every evening would be preparing dinner, waiting for dad to come home. Um, I had a younger brother, but he was younger and not in the kitchen at the time. He was maybe napping or whatever. But she had a radio on, and it was a little Bakelite radio that sat in the windowsill, and we listened to the news. And it I would hear these voices coming in from afar. At the time, I believe that some of the reporting was coming from Quemoy and Matsu when there were the shelling of the islands, and then there would be voices coming in from London. It was a CBS radio station, and so names like probably Winston Burdett and Charles Collingwood and I would hear these voices, not always understanding what they were talking about, but I was fascinated to learn that they were someplace else around the world. And I was in my kitchen listening to them, and something seeded in me that, boy, what a great adventure that would be. So I think that I probably, maybe specifically, but inadvertently, was guided and navigated by that experience to want to be that guy in a trench coat someplace
And
telling
you
people
know,
about what was going on.
and do you know what mine is? And it's tied to you, my friend. Get this. Recently, I'm working. I work with a Magic Tide Cabaret. We brought on some people, and we have a partnership, and it's a PR company, and they're one of the best in town. I'm gonna give them a shout out. Meg Associates, full service public relations company, and they've been helping us with our brand and promote our productions and so on and so forth. Great people, but they were writing a press release on my behalf to talk about my career, blah blah blah, and they were coming up with subtitles. And one of the subtitles was The Ed Sullivan of Indianapolis, because they had interviewed me, and I had dropped the fact that I said, well, you know, Tom Cochrun, my dear friend Tom Cochrun, used to tease me about that. He used to say, Tom, you are the Ed Sullivan of Indianapolis, because I had a thing for discovering young talent and putting them in my docudramas, actors, a lot of them from community theater. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was teaching myself movie techniques with photographers that you all work with, Bill Shomo and Jim, who went over to FYI, Jim Simmons. You remember those guys?
Yes,
Well,
yes.
Bill Shomo, you just saw him. I mean,
Yeah, Bill was out here. His wife's family connection brought him out here for a stay, and we had a delightful evening with them.
oh,
And Bill sort of regaled me with the story of a book that he's written about an elephant, and the book is launching, and it's out in
really?
yes,
I need to
and
track him down.
you
Well,
do. I mean,
Bill was just a joy, and I agreed when he left town to, I don't know where he went. I think I need another, I can't remember. But, you know, those days, I just really, and like you know, I just didn't, I never had limits, you know, and I can't believe Channel 6 let me spend all that money and do anything I wanted to after a while. But
well,
I
you know,
guess the
you were
proof is
lucky.
in the
That was
pudding.
you were there in the Time Life days, right? I
Oh
mean,
yeah, well, not exactly. It was the McGraw-Hill days. I was there for that.
and they still had this commitment to doing public information programming and
Oh
public
yeah.
uh
Well, they kind of had to, because when they bought from Time Life, there was FCC requirements that they increased their minority programming and hiring. That's how I got there in the first place. They had to pluck me from obscurity in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and bring me to hit it up, because there were no brown faces who didn't have accents,
yeah.
basically.
When you were a kid, do you remember? I think his name was Gene Wilson. He was a news anchor in Fort Wayne.
Oh, of course, yeah, yeah.
He was on my second newspaper route. I had a route that took me originally into the perimeter along Clinton Street into downtown Fort Wayne
Oh my
and sort of a
goodness.
blue collar and working neighborhood.
Oh yeah.
And there were people that didn't want to pay the newspaper boy. Anyway, after a year or so, I got a route that was closer to where I lived, and it included Fairfield Circle and the Fairfield Manor. And Gene Wilson was a tenant of the Fairfield Manor, which
Wait
was
a
a
minute,
very,
you lived in Fort Wayne. Remind me of that. I don't remember
yeah,
that.
I was in the sixth, seventh, and eighth
Oh
grade.
my gosh, I'd forgotten that.
I went to
Wow.
South Wayne Elementary, and then everybody else went to I can't remember the junior high school that fed into Fort Wayne
Wow.
South.
So you grew up with
Harrison
WKJG,
Hill. They
WTPA, and WANE,
and I was
and
on
WOWO radio.
yeah, and I was on Club 21.
And I was on Dance Day,
Was it Gene Randall? Was that his name?
Channel 8. Oh, I can't remember his name. And
Yeah.
I snuck on with Georgette Harbor, and the nuns almost suspended us. They saw us on TV, and boy, did we get it the next day. And also, I was really embarrassed because I didn't remember the name of Azar's phone number, and I didn't get the free strawberry pie.
Well, when I was on Club 21, I think Jerry Booth was the fellow's name. And he ended up coming down to Indianapolis later, but he was an afternoon kid show host, and he also did the Club 21, but you could
Oh,
have all the Kentucky Fried Chicken you could eat. And I remember that was the real benefit of being on Club 21. But
yeah.
I was the first time I was collecting for I'd do the newspaper drop in the apartment building, which was great during the winter. But Gene Wilson came to the door and he was wearing a bathrobe and maybe an ascot. And I looked at him and I recognized him from television and he says, "Are you collecting for the newspaper?" Because I was stunned. And I said, "Yes." He says, "Well, you and I are in the same business."
Oh my goodness. Wow. So, but Tom, think about that. Think about those memories. And, I had similar ones. Uh, who's the name? He was in the movie Hoosiers. He played himself, Hilliard Gates.
Yes.
I actually interviewed him one day. I got fired from my part-time job. I had no clue about what my life would be. Somehow, I don't know, I had figured out that it could be broadcast. And that's a long story. And, we'll get in someday. It'll be in my book if I ever write it. But I ended up going to one day, I was sent home for being late. They made an example of me. So I said, well, darn it. I'm gonna go to TV stations and see if I can get a job at a TV station. I mean, I had no clue what I was doing. And I managed to get an appointment with Hilliard Gates of all. I mean, he was like, the broadcaster in
Yeah.
Fort Wayne, and if not the
Yes.
state. He played himself. He covered the state tourney, right?
He was. He
And
was the dean.
I think he was just charmed by me. Here's this kid, like off the streets, and I think my charm was enough that, he was just very kind and friendly. He said, basically, kid, you don't have a degree, you don't have any experience, but I suggest you go to a radio station and maybe get a job sweeping floors and maybe work your way up, and then someday maybe you could go into TV, but it's unlikely. Bless his heart. So I don't know. When he told me that, it kind of pissed me off in a way because I thought, well, you know how you are when you're young. Um, and he was an older guy, so it was like, I had a problem with authority anyway. Anyway, that's my story about how these people who cross our paths and they end up influencing in ways we could never know.
There's a footnote about those 3 years we lived in Fort Wayne on Rose Lane. After the 1 year at South Wayne, as a new kid in town, new kid in school, everybody in sixth grade went to Hoagland Junior High School,
Oh yeah.
which was which was a feeder to Fort Wayne Central. And I was in the minority as a white kid. There were more African American and more Hispanic kids at Hoagland than there were white. I was on a basketball team with two or three Dominguezes. Uh, there was Abraham Lincoln, Samuel Wade, Franklin Roosevelt Dodds, Ulysses S. Grant. These are African American kids. Manny Dominguez. Anyway, I think David Fishbaugh was his name. He and I were the two white kids on the basketball team. But what a blessing! What a great experience. I mean, being at the school, but also being in a minority perspective, uh,
Hmm.
and having friends that were black and friends who were brown,
Hmm.
and being on a team with them, and it was a great experience. And that would never have happened if I hadn't spent
Well,
my
that accounts for going back to when we first met. You were so accepting of me, and I remember my coming out to you, and you just like looked at me, and I don't know what you said. It just indicates it's like no big deal. So what? Whatever.
Lana
And
and I were
but you
talking
said
about.
that I had a habit. You used to tease me because I would come to you when I was going through something traumatic, and you said, "Tom, it's." I think you were kind of. It was actually kind of condescending. You would say that. Well, Tom, I could tell you're a Catholic because you like to confess. You like to go to.
Did I say that?
Yeah, you did.
Well, well, when you came out to Lana and me, it was a very poignant moment, and I think we both said, Tom, we know this, and had known it, and but we loved you as a friend, and I never thought it was important enough to bring up,
Yeah.
but
But you had
I
no
was.
idea how critical it was to me because, I was in an industry where you could still be fired. I was
Yes.
still, I mean, I was working at a time where you could be, and, I know looking back, there was a time when you came to me, we'll leave names out of it, but I can tell you, I applied for a job at Channel 8 and you came back. It was hard for you to tell me. So, Tom, you didn't get the job because they knew you were gay. I don't know if you remember that. But I don't. I remember that and I remember it vividly. But that was the reality of the day. And of
Yeah.
course, now I just love seeing all the brown and black faces on the air. And it really, I stand on the shoulders of people who came before me. But there were much fewer. When I came to Channel 6, it was Barbara Boyd and a guy, his first name, I can't remember his name, Stubbs. Do you remember him? They were
I
the
do.
only
Was it
black
Carl? Was it Carl?
Carl. Yeah, I think it was Carl Stubbs. And so Barbara Boyd is, she is an icon in this town with black reporters. And, it's kind of cool to have lived through that continuum and for you to see the talent on the air now.
Yes, absolutely. And we were there again, sort of on the front line when all of that was occurring. And um, and it worries me that what took an enormous amount of effort and sacrifice, and it took people being told no, and it took litigation, and it took marches, and it took people pushing on legislators to change the laws, that we lived through that and understand what it took. And I'm concerned at the political tone, not only in the United States, but around the world today, is that some of the onus, some of the importance of making sure that there is full human dignity and full human liberty uh, isn't as important uh, to people, some people in contemporary political culture as it was for us. Um, and we inherited the benefit of all the work of the civil rights struggle that preceded the time where we may have joined the efforts in the 60s. I mean, this goes back. And then you think, my heavens, the suffragettes who started in Europe
Yes.
and and the abuse and I mean, the loss of life, the trauma that 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 involved, and that's important history. And we lived into sort of the footnote of some of that, and maybe played our part. But I'm not so sure that a lot of contemporary society globally appreciates or understands the importance of that struggle. And we have to be diligent, and I think we have to tell the stories, and we have to do the history, and we have to remind people.
Tom, let's talk about what's going on with you today in your so-called golden years. You have a wonderful, wonderful blog. So tell people what it's called. Tell us about your blog. Do you still call it a blog, or what do you call? I'm no longer a blogger. I am an influencer.
Well, I'm not an influencer. I'm still an old blogger. There is in the social
That
media.
wasn't by choice. That's what I was started to be called. I thought, well, I'll embrace that,
Well, you
hopefully.
do it well, and you're active with your podcast, and you're still on traditional media, and you're writing, and more, and I think it's great. The more platforms you're on, the better. I started writing a blog almost 20 years ago because I was writing another book. And one of the agents that I was talking to says you need to build up your social media. And at the time, social media was not at all what it is today. And I said, well, what do you recommend? He said, write a blog. And so I started writing a blog, and I thought of it as a newspaper column. One of the jobs that I always lusted for was to be a newspaper columnist. I admired those people, and so I thought, well, I've got my chance. I've got my own little pop stand here, and it also gave me a chance to practice, my great fondness and hobby for photography. And so I was able to capture a lot of beautiful images, and now I had a place to post them. And then from time to time, there were social trends or political thoughts, and so this has evolved. I've written about 15,000, and
Really?
yeah, it's now coming down to not all of those went on. I wrote, and some just I put back. I don't know. I
Okay.
probably published maybe 2,000, close to 2,000.
Okay.
And but all that writing was, I found it's a place to continue to churn and do the writing. And a lot of things evolved out of that that had nothing to do with the blog. It was just that I needed a format. When I started, it was the discipline of writing the blog that led me into doing some other writing and other projects. And so that's how that aggregate number grew on the tab count the format I work in. Um, but so I still do it, not nearly as frequently as I did. Sadly, a lot of my posts now are about people who pass, or
Mm.
from time to time a political observation. But the blog was one thing that I did. I also got involved in the community, and I've been very active in some groups here, a benevolent society. I'm part of a group that
What
delivers.
is the Benevolent Society?
It's a group that gets together and essentially gives money away.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
and
interesting.
it was a group that had existed as a lodge years and years ago, and they had properties, and they built up a nice cash account, and then they became engaged in simply being benefactors. And so when we moved out here, a couple of the old boys that had been in Cambria for a long time asked me if I would come in and be a part of the organization. And so we have given away money, and we have done things, for community support. I'm a part of an organization that delivers medical equipment. It also was a volunteer group that started about 45 years ago. I'm a part of my Safe Harbor Presbyterian Church, have been active in that for a long time, and play tennis
Yeah.
and
So
write.
I have to ask you the obvious question. Do you miss journalism? Do you miss television? Do you miss being in the public eye, if you will.
I don't miss being in the public eye, but I do miss being involved in the decision making of what and how stories get covered. Uh, now I'm being an elder. It's
Yeah.
I'm being the old, one of the old guys
Are
saying,
you doing any workshops, teaching anything like that in and around where you
yeah,
live?
I was part of a
Any
group that started
universities?
a
Go ahead.
community newspaper, and we had the community newspaper up and going for a while when our weekly ceased to publish. And I've got an idea now that I'm working on with some other old journalists. We're going to try to get the high school to take on the task of being a community newspaper. Now we're a community of 6,400 people max, 5,000 people, but it's still important to know what's going on with the
When you
local.
say old journalists, what do you mean?
They're retired journalists.
Reporters, columnists, so on and so forth, publishers,
Yes,
the
yeah.
whole everybody.
There's a fellow named Bill Seavey who was a writer for magazines in New York and a photographer. There's a dynamic woman, Christine Heinrichs, who still does some work. She writes for some global magazines. She covers environment. She happens to be an expert on chickens, on elephant seals, and she also covers the local community council as thoroughly as anyone has ever covered any government body. She does a great job. But we're doing it sort of ad hoc. We had a community newspaper for a while that was online. It was all volunteer, but we're trying to make it a little bit more, I guess, foundational by if we can engage the school and it becomes something that the students do with direction of the staff, that they will learn community news reporting institutionally, and we'll help them set up beats and how to do it and give them advice. And then it just becomes a training component so that there is always a new generation of community reporters being
Okay, so
produced.
that's print. Are you doing anything around television or film
Not
or
anymore.
video?
I did some consulting for a while for a couple of fellows that I had worked with who were working on projects, and I did some consulting and some production design stuff. But I'm ready to hit 80, and and so I'm trying to look around and enjoy life,
Yeah.
and and still try to be a positive footprint in the community, enjoy my family, um, get back.
And I want to share that I've known your family for many years, including your daughters, Catherine and Kristen, and you're also a grandfather, right?
Yes, I have
Still, of course.
a granddaughter, Addie, who is 10, Adelaide Rose, and Henry, who is 8.
Oh my goodness. Last time
Yeah,
I saw them, they were toddlers.
yeah. And
Yeah, and how are they? How are the girls, as we'll call them, the kids?
my daughters are great. Kristen
Mhm.
lives in Cambria, and like a lot of the kids in her generation, she's in the gig economy. She's an administrator at the Episcopal Church. She's an online editor for a financial company out east, and she is the office manager for a financial firm in Cambria. My youngest, Catherine, is a OB. She's an obstetrics nurse at French hospital, part of the Dignity system in San Luis Obispo.
Hmm.
Henry is a dynamic young boy with lots of energy, and Addie is one of the sweethearts of the world. She really
I
is. She's
think I was when I was out there, we went out there to celebrate Kristen and her husband. His name? What was his
well,
name?
well,
Was it? Go ahead.
she is single.
Okay.
Chris, it was maybe Catherine and Neil.
I'm sorry, Catherine. It was Catherine that I'm talking about. We went out for a birthday party for your grandson early.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
was like,
Neil's an artist. He's a
yes.
manager of an architectural firm, and they're happy. In fact, my two daughters and Lana and the two grandkids are at this hour at the beach.
Okay.
I got a picture from them a little earlier, and they're having a
Okay.
great day at the beach.
So for our listeners, just prior to this recording, to starting this recording, you sent me a throwback photo, which I just absolutely loved. I look like I look like a shoe-in for Bruno Mars back then when I had the stash, which was my trademark for a long time. And of course, I had a big head of curly black hair, but Kristen was sitting in my lap with her kitty. And by the way, I have a kitty looks just like that. Toby is his name. A gold or yellow tabby. And but anyway, people commented on that post. Oh, I love your t-shirt. It was a Vogue t-shirt. It was so filled, and I was sitting in your front lawn. I could see the house behind me. It wasn't in the photo, but it just like, I was so happy to see that photo. And, I documented my own life, Tom, for, 50 years. And
Yeah,
you might be interested in knowing, and I think you have some things there as well. My whole collection of photographs are with the Indiana State Historical Society. They asked for my quote collection
good, good.
of my papers, my papers. Doesn't that sound important? And but anyway, because they said, Tom, we would like your career reflects a certain period of time in Indianapolis covering the arts. So that was quite an honor, quite an honor.
Here's an interesting note on that. All of my papers are also at the Indiana Historical Society.
Yep, I knew that. Yep.
All the documents and et cetera. So 50 years hence, 100 years hence, if there's an aspiring journalist or storyteller or an artificial intelligence agent that wants to know something about life in Indianapolis during our time, there are two Toms they can go to.
Yeah, and and think about it, they're going to have to look at our stuff with white gloves in a private room. I mean, you think about it, it's fun and I was talking to you, just what you and I have been through, the continuum, and I saw a really great Facebook post about this very thing. We're the only generation that's lived between analog and digital. We grew up in the middle of them. So we got to experience like, the radio and the wall phone and then so on and so forth, letter writing, and now you and I are able to communicate on this thing called the internet. And I have this little portable microphone. I mean,
Yeah.
think about it. It's just who knew who would ever think that you and I, all these years later, I'm sitting in my kitchen, and you're in your office, and you are in California. I mean, could you ever imagine? And we could have done it on this iPhone that I'm showing you.
Yeah. Well, I remember the Weekly Reader, when we were in school, they talked about someday you would be talking to people with pictures. It would be like television. You'd be talking, and here we are.
And the
So,
Jetsons have all come true,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And soon we'll be able to fly around. I mean, gosh, think about the drones are delivering target stuff. I mean, so it's fun, isn't it, to sort of reflect? You've always been reflective as I have, and that's again probably the reason why I said that I don't like small talk. I mean, it's part of my nature. You're like we're curious people, right?
yep.
And do you still? Well, I know you do research. Do you still like to learn? Are you continually educating yourself?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's one of the benefits of the age that we live in, because right at our fingertips, we're able to access data and knowledge and information um, unbelievably. When I was a kid, I used to look through the National Geographics that a neighbor had and would pass along our way, and we had hand-me-down uh, encyclopedias, and I used to just go through the encyclopedias, page by page. Now I just hit a key and
And think about when you did your papers, you had to go to the public library and you had to go through the card catalog. How do we do that?
I think there are some old skills that should not be lost.
No.
I
Well,
think, I think,
the good news is, boy, do we sound like old farts or what? But
yeah, we do.
think about kids that they're bringing back cursive writing. I'm so happy to hear that. They finally made the connection. It's good for their brains.
Well, I think the decisions that were made recently on social
No.
media and the impact on kids uh, will hopefully be a an opportunity for, again, parents and teachers and educators and reasonable people in the community to sort of take take the upper ground, take the upper hand, and make sure that we are not just experimenting or allowing our kids to be abused by addictive technology, to be sort of driven by algorithms into very dark and dangerous places in their life simply for profit.
What
And
is has Catherine and Kristen set ground rules for when they're going to give their kids phones?
we
And
talk about it, and I have shared with them the research that Jonathan Haidt, Haidt, has done. He's written a couple of books, and a couple of other folks that were early on in developing AI and sort of the principle of an algorithm feeding back on what you are looking at to them. Neither one of the kids are on individual phones yet. They're thinking that their social media time will be controlled. The phone, they're even talking about maybe going back to a clamshell phone. So if they
Mhm.
need, so, so I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
it's a return to the future here.
Yeah. Tom, I would really like for you as we close this show, since this show is listened to primarily lovers of the performing arts, but I think my listeners are, love the liberal arts and they read, they're very interested in current events in the media, of course, and I think there's a lot of bleed over as we discover overlap. But I still want to know your perspective for my listeners. One of the things that besides broadcasting and sharing information and all the things that has made our friendship so fruitful over the years is that your love for the arts and mine for the arts. Lana, by the way, we didn't mention that she's a visual artist. I mean, that talent. I'm sure the work that she's done since I last is she continues to grow. Is she still painting or what's going on?
She is doing a lot of ceramic work. She is not painting as much. It just was not as much of an artistic satisfaction to her.
Okay.
Had been. She did a lot of painting. She did a number of one-woman shows out here. She won some juried shows. Her paintings can still continue to sell. There's a gallery that represents her. She just doesn't have the desire to do more landscape or more on
Understand.
plein air. Um, she has started doing a series of little, and I think you've seen them, little cards, watercolor cards. And Kristen is also doing some now, and they're absolutely beautiful. And there's probably an ulterior motive because uh, tourists can come to this area and they're less likely to take a painting home than they are to take a little ceramic piece that she has done and does a lot of those, and maybe a pack of cards, little watercolors. And I'm really curious to see how the two of them do with this. Already
Yeah.
Lana has sold a lot of cards, but she still is active. She still is in the garden, and her medium of choice now is probably watercolor.
Okay. Does she have a website, Tom, that we can share?
No, no, she's just not
Okay.
interested. Could ne-
Okay.
could never get her to keep it up.
So
Uh,
people have to come to Cambria.
that's it. Yeah,
That's
it's an
fine.
exclusive market.
Yeah. And do you share her work on your website, on your podcast, on your blog ever?
Yeah, from time to time I have, and as I watch her put these cards together, I've done sort of a piece or two on watching
Mhm.
the evolution. She does a series of cards that, and this is frameable art, but they're sold as cards, and some people do use them as cards, and but most people tend to frame these things. Um, they're women, but she does sort of a collage technique where she uses fabric or some kind of material to build the hats and the feathers and maybe the drop earrings
Mhm.
or the necklaces and maybe the fabric that the women are wearing, and they're marvelous.
Mm.
But you're asking the question to me probably prompts me I need to do this again.
Oh yeah,
Do
yeah.
another.
Well, I treasure my early Lana Cochrun works, and and I have a shelf of miniatures, and she's the one who got me started in a lifelong collection of miniatures, and I have a special shelf that they're placed on, and she did. There was a time when she was in her period where she did miniature couches and miniature chairs with and little bears and little tiny saucers and cups and things like that. And of course, I have a feathered head when she was in her feathered head period, if you will. And I don't believe I have paintings or any watercolors. But in any case, she is just very her. I can't her work always had a how would I describe it if I were reviewing it? It had a warmth to it. It had a charm. He was
Yeah.
just I just loved it. It just was uplifting. All I could say was
Her
uplifting.
brush strokes, a
Huh?
lot of her stroke technique was sometimes commented on by judges in some of the juries
Yeah.
or that. And she painted with a kind of passion. She did plein air wonderfully for a number of years and was part of a
Yeah.
art group out here, the plein air painters, the Wednesday
Oh,
irregulars.
yeah. That's
And
some of my favorite. That's one of my favorite genres, by the way. I have pieces
yeah.
like that. So tell me, what do you have performing arts organizations in Cambria and what's the performing arts scene there? Theater, ballet, opera? What do you do? What do you see
We
it?
in San Luis Obispo at the Cal Poly, the Performing Arts Center, there's all of that. It's available. In Cambria itself, we have a community, the CCAT, the Community Center for Arts and Theater, and they do a series of shows. Some of them are musical, some of them are drama. We've seen some great performance. The nice thing is there are a number of people who had worked in theater or film or television, maybe character actors or small players, and they live in the area, and so the quality of productions are
It
enjoyable.
seems to me when I went to visit you, we went to see some production and friends of yours were involved. I can't remember. But
There's a lady, it may have been Jill Turnbow. Jill
okay.
she toured as a comedian, but she's also directed and acted and has done
Okay.
one women shows, and she's been a dynamo here. So
Yeah.
we're supportive of that.
Mm.
We also there's a lot of music in the area that we enjoy. Uh, um,
Course.
yeah, and
Course.
a lot of musicians. And so it's a beautiful drive down to San Luis if we want to go to the Performing Arts Center, which is a beautiful venue on the Cal Poly campus. Um, or we go to our little theater here. And
Yeah. So Tom, tell me for our listeners as I say goodbye to you, what is the value of supporting the performing arts, attending supporting live entertainment? What is the value that one can gain from those kind of activities?
there is, I suppose, the undergirding importance is that by participating and by supporting, you allow it to continue for other generations and for other people. And one needs to continue to support live performing arts because we cannot just exist in a digitized environment in society. I mean, it's one thing of convenience to be able, I watched Hamnet on home screening.
Mm.
Uh, but it was just easier given all the circumstances than going to a theater and watching it. But shame on me for when I don't sit in a movie theater. Shame on me when I don't support the local performing arts. There's something about live theater that is special to that night and that moment. It's when the curtain rises or the program begins. This has never happened before. Even though the show was done maybe earlier in the
Mhm.
day and a matinee or was done last night, it is not the same performance as you sitting in that audience, breathing that air, watching the performance, feeding back with your own emotional vibe to the people who are on the stage entertaining you. Maybe making you laugh, making you cry, telling you the truth. It is a live experience, and live performance is something that we have to continue to value, and we benefit from it. Uh, and so that's, I guess,
And I would add
my
that, and
point.
I think you'll agree as well, that in these days of polarization, it is refreshing as pure escapism to be able to enjoy something that brings the community together, and you don't know the politics of the people on either side of you. It doesn't matter because you're focused on one thing. And for me, it's the arts and sports as well. Right now, the only things we have left, right? I mean, and then of course there's nature. You
Well,
can run into people on the trails out there. You don't know their politics, or
yeah.
if they've got dogs, you can just small talk and enjoy each other.
And I would also say the music that is available through the
Oh
Indiana
yeah.
Symphony Orchestra and the subsets of that and the Performing Center up in Carmel. That is also something that's very important because it's the same kind of dynamic. There is something about watching somebody at the piano or
Oh yeah.
seeing the string section and hearing them as opposed to hearing it on a recording. And I'll tell you who really sensitized me to that piece of the arts community was Bob Beckman when
Of
he was in the
course.
mayor's office. And
Oh
Bob
yeah.
said, you might be interested in doing a story. There's a guy coming and he's going to be out at the Lilly Pavilion at the art museum, and he's going to have an old harpsichord that he's going to be playing. I'd never heard a harpsichord being played before. I'd heard a harpsichord. So I went out and did an interview of being played, and then I took Lana and we went back to the concert the next day, and there were a few strings that were accompanying him, and I was just absolutely overwhelmed by sort of the magic of being enveloped in that sound and that music, and realizing that yeah, the music we listen to in our idiom and our generation is great, creative, it moves us, but that's not all there is. And so when you have an opportunity to support live music, please do so. Most musicians are not wealthy people,
Yeah.
and musicians need to be supported like actors.
Well, the other night, I, I don't recall, Tom, but have I kept you abreast of some of my activities with Magic the Cabaret? We recently had Hampton Calloway perform a benefit for us.
I read about that. Yeah.
It was off the charts, wildly successful. And the fact that a woman of her renown and the caliber of her talent would take a break from her schedule and come and support a small organization because she believes in our mission, to nurture, and we're an incubator for discovering. Yeah, this is the Ed Sullivan part. I still love discovering new talent and giving them a platform, to develop a career. That gives me so much satisfaction. But Anne supports it. And so it was wildly successful. And I think that the young people, okay, so what I was getting at, the reason that people say, where do you get the energy to keep going the way you do? And I said, well, think about it. I'm immersed in the arts. I'm in the theater or a concert hall at least 3 or 4 times a week, and then I write about it. How can I be, gloomy and depressed? Although there's that free-floating anxiety that we're all experiencing. That's there, but at least I get a little break and there's that value of the arts, right?
The arts, the arts,
Escapism.
the arts impact us visually, what we hear, intellectually, it stimulates us, it challenges us, it entertains us, but I think it also connects with maybe more mystical, ethereal, spiritual part of us as people. There is something about arts that enlighten and engage and empower and uplift and heal. And I think that we should never lose sight of that. And it's available. And it is people doing their best for the benefit of those who are receiving it. And
Yeah.
in that is an intimacy and a relationship that is a kind of love, and it has to be.
Well, my friend, this makes me miss I don't know, when you were living down in the country, you didn't have any neighbors. I remember that long, on half a mile driveway where your dog would be there to greet me.
Right.
And what was
Chase
his name? The lab? Was it
Inky, Inky.
Inky, Black Inky? God, love him. But, I remember nights when we would stay up, Lana would go to bed because she just like doze off because we were still going.
Yeah, well, that's
With
us. And
glasses of
here we are.
wine, and we would go into the night talking about God knows everything. And this has reminded me of that, how much I miss those conversations. So,
Well, we'll have to do
but
another one sometime.
sure, time and space,
Yeah,
we can't the world is that way. People don't stay in one place anymore, right?
right.
And you can't stay in touch with everybody that you'd like to, that's for sure.
Well, this has been fun, Tom. It is good to see you as always. It's good I remember when we would grab a lunch when we were working, and a lunch hour suddenly evaporated, and
Yeah.
we had
Well,
started.
remember we joked about it. I said, Tom, I'm coming down, but I've got an agenda. We have
Yeah,
to stick to an agenda.
that's right.
Well, I think that there were, we had some help along the way, well, this is in 2027. Back in the day, we get a little high and that was fun. And we would just go on and on and on and on. I just Well, my friend, give my love to your family, and you'll have to come back for a part two. I mean,
Okay,
there's things
be
we haven't
fun.
even discussed that are relevant. So thank you for taking the time, truly, and the 3 hour difference. This worked out pretty good, right?
It sure did, Tom. This is
Okay.
Thank
All
you, brother.
right. Okay. Our thanks go out to our media sponsor, Urban Times. Urban Times is a monthly news magazine which serves as the official newsletter for 15 Indianapolis neighborhoods, offering news about development, arts and entertainment, and from the business community. Thank you for joining me on the aisle. Please subscribe to my podcast, and if you want to hear previous episodes, find them on the All Indiana Podcast Network, or listen to them wherever you get your podcasts. This is Tom Alvarez.
Who will take center stage on the podcast next? Your seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez awaits. Follow Tom on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and make sure to visit tomalvarez.studio. Watch Tom every other Thursday on Lifestyle Live on Wish TV, and make sure to listen every week here on the All Indiana Podcast Network.